Hey everybody, welcome back to another All Things MSP Live. We have what I think is going to be a really fun episode tonight. We're going to be talking about sales objections, and we might talk about a little bit of whiskey too, just because I know that a lot of you are into that kind of thing. And so it's just one of those things that bears talking about from time to time. But tonight is mainly about sales objections. And we're just, going to talk about some of the common sales objections we get. And if my guest is up to it, and I think, I know he is, whether or not he wants to do it tonight or not, maybe we'll even do a little bit of role playing where I can play the small business owner and he can play the MSP, which I think will be helpful for everybody. So, little housekeeping. Let's make sure that all of the streams are live. So let's just double check here. Okay, LinkedIn is live. Facebook is live. And YouTube is live. So let's go through and I tell you what, if you're here, go ahead and comment. Let me know that you're here. Let me know that comments are working from that side. And I'm going to make sure that they're working from this side. So, hello, YouTube. And Eric is here on Facebook. Looks like YouTube comments are working from my side. I wish I could permanently mute them all so that they didn't automatically come talk to me. Not the people. Sorry, Eric. I didn't mean you. I meant when I brought up the live streams on my own computer to make sure that they're working. All right. So this is Facebook. So hello, Facebook. And we have Justin Escar in the house, and he's commenting on my shirt. Yes, this is one of my, one of the shirts you'll commonly see me wear when I'm doing these things. Although I'm wondering if like the blue and the red with the blue and the red back here is probably maybe too matchy-matchy. I don't know. All right, and let's check LinkedIn. All right, and we've got David and Krista here. So we've got quite a few people who have joined tonight, which is great. Really do appreciate people joining. It does help, obviously, with the numbers. And hey, we do this for you. For the same reason that Justin and I do the podcast every week. We do this for the benefit of the community. And, there's a lot of things that we'd like to do. And we want to make sure that we're staying in sync or aligned with what you want from this community. So go ahead, feel free, go to the Facebook group or comment on this live stream what types of topics you guys would like to see us cover. Because I have plenty of MSPs. Craig loves coming on and talking about just about anything. He'll take his experience as an MSP and share everything that he's learned over the years. All right. Keith, no, this is not the Hunter Biden disposition. And I'm pretty sure you meant deposition, but, I spell just about as well. All right. Well, we're kind of winding down and we did start a little bit late. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little word from our sponsors. Of course, we have one of our premier sponsors, MoveBot. If you do a lot of migrations or you're doing a lot of moving from on-premise into different cloud solutions, MoveBot is a great option for doing that. One of the reasons I like it is because it'll actually tell you what to expect in advance and kind of monitor the migration for you. So that's a great reason to take a look at MoveBot, because I know a lot of people are moving both files as well as email, because they move files and email now. We just talked the other day, and they've got something called ludicrous speed for SharePoint migrations now. So we'll probably have something more on that in an office hours coming up in the next, I think it'll probably be in the next 30 days or so. And then, of course, Sorry, was I muted for the MoveBot one too? I hope not. Um, anyway, SuperOps.ai is another premier sponsor, an RMM PSA combined tool, built for growth, built for the future. They have a lot of new content coming out for the community. They've got a couple of ebooks. So go ahead and look for that. We actually posted the first one in the Facebook group and on the LinkedIn page earlier this week. So take a look for that. It's on skyrocketing your revenue growth, going from 1 million to 10 million. It's about 12 pages of a lot of great information on that. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we did have a patron store, a place where you can go buy merchandise. You can buy t-shirts, you can buy hoodies, you can buy puzzles. I know it's silly, it's stupid, but the puzzle was in there. So I just slapped a logo on it and now you can buy it. Any way that you want to choose to support us, that's great. We appreciate all of it, but that's not what you're here for. Let's get on with the show. Oh, Keith J. Nelson, you have the opportunity to come on this show pretty much anytime you want to. You have an open invitation, sir, to be on this show. And you know what? Now that you keep pushing it, I'm just going to schedule it and put you on the calendar, and you're just not going to have a choice. But we always appreciate you being in the comments because you do add a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge to these conversations. And Eric, I don't know about those dinosaurs. I think a lot of us fall into that category these days. So, lots of people who have kind of been doing this for a little bit now. Officially, I can say I've been doing it since '92. Although technically, when my mom was driving me around to do consulting in like '85, because I didn't have a driver's license yet. I don't know. Do we count that? Keith, you are not a star on the Flintstones. Okay. This is really not what we wanted to talk about tonight. We really wanted to talk about sales objections. So, without further ado, no stranger to the show, Mr. Craig Willard.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for, coming in on short notice. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. This will be an interesting one and from an interesting perspective. But you mentioned, and I don't know if Eric's watching, my partner, but just this is and whiskey, right? This is what we're doing,
Yes.
right? In whiskey, kind of. Okay. And so Taylor says hi.
So my choice tonight is Weldon Mills. This is a little North Carolina distillery. Has won quite a few awards. Amy and I were actually driving back from Virginia. We just went up to Busch Gardens for a weekend and saw the signs for it and decided to stop. Ended up buying like 4 bottles while we were there. It's really, really good. This one is their barrel proof. It's 111 proof. So you would think, because that's a pretty pretty good proof, but it's really, really smooth. Like, I'm amazed at how smooth this is.
I'll have to try that.
So, of course, it's made in North Carolina, so I don't know. Some of you purists might, take issue with it. So, Craig, tonight, we had tossed back different ideas as to what we wanted to maybe talk about tonight, and we landed on sales objections. Sure. Why do you think that MSPs making sure that they understand what those common objections are and what to do about them, why is that important to, even a small MSP?
Well, and I'm coming in. Am I coming in blurry for you? I'm sorry. I don't know if it's just
your
my
sound
side or
is
if
fine.
it's just.
It does look like we
Okay.
may be having some bandwidth issues.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'm
As long
getting
as my sound's
fiber in the
good, I
next
can
6
talk.
months.
Okay. So it's incredibly important because it's it's like the vaccine for your calls when you have some sort of conversation with a prospect and they've got a reason they don't want to say yes and they have a reason to say no. It's you need to be able to offset that. But I honestly, so just a little bit of just transparency. So there's 3 partners in my business. My partner, 2 of us are technical, and we have a specific sales and marketing guy. He makes all those main entrance phone calls and things of that nature. But I've been able to see it, and my other partner's been able to see this too from the backside as we have the conversations, the deeper conversations once we get through the front door. I've really learned that oftentimes it's not really the objection that's the problem. It's that the ICP or the ideal client profile or that customer that you really want to be going after is the wrong person. And so, if you haven't outlined that clearly enough and you know exactly who you're going after and you're just kind of shotgun approaching it, you're going to get a lot more objections. And so I don't want objections.
Right.
That's the first thing that we've chosen to do is we're going to make sure that we know exactly who we want to go after. And we're going to look specifically for those individuals. And then we're going to have conversations that kind of the intent is that every time you do receive an objection from even an ICP, is that you put that in your backpack and you have an answer for that you say before they ever get to talk about it.
Right.
And if you can hit that ball out of the park every time they have a thought of an objection and you've answered it before they've ever verbalized it, the process gets a lot easier, but it takes a little bit more work on the front end to make sure that we're kind of shooting towards the right target. Otherwise, the sales process gets burdensome. You're a one-man show and you're just dragging your feet, not only to run your business, but to get new clients because you get tired and you get beat up with all the no's and the objections. And I'm not paying that kind of money and all this stuff. So that front load would work really to me. And what we've experienced has been significantly different than what we used to do, which was more of the shotgun approach.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. And we've talked about ICP, especially on the podcast. I think we talked about it with Paul Green. We've talked about it with several people who are more marketing type of people in the channel, and that is, you're right. That's where you need to start because you'll get less objections if you're talking to the right person, right? First of all.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you're talking to your
Yep.
ICP, you're more likely to get less objections in the first place. And then your second
Yep.
point was every time you get one of those objections, you put it, like you said, in your backpack. And then you make sure
Yep.
that for the next time, you already have the answer for that, whether it's
Sure.
just you or whether you have a sales team, because it's really important, especially if you have a sales team. Because if you're really good, you can probably make up some of these answers on the fly. You're the business owner, you've heard it before, you're kind of already prepared for it, even if you didn't really prepare, like, you're talking about. But if you have a sales
Yep.
team, even if it's just one person, you are the best person to arm them with the answer to those objections.
Right. Yeah, very much so. We've been able to over the years, and so our normal process is our sales and marketing partner will go out. He will have the entry conversations, and he will kind of qualify them, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then it's kind of there's a why, there's a split, and so he'll divvy those out to either my partner Eric or myself, and so then we'll kind of take it from there, and we'll have a deeper conversation. We don't really talk about technology a whole lot. It's very high level. It's very value driven, and when you do it that way, that process just becomes easier. But if you think about the biggest objection that most people talk about, it's price. People complain all the time that you're just too expensive. Well, really the truth is, A, that's either not your ICP, that's not the person you should be going after, or B, you've not done a very good job of validating to that individual your value. What are you
Yep.
creating? And so when you teach them about your value and it is an educational process, then that becomes a different conversation. And instead of them saying you're too expensive, they end up saying like something like, "Well, you're expensive and I can't afford you, but I understand and I want this. I just got to figure it
Right.
out." Or they'll say, where do I sign up?" But if they just say you're too expensive, well, you're in this commodity bucket and you're just being compared to the guy down the street because you haven't proven that you're any different. We like to even start with that. Well, look, if you're looking for someone that's only wanting to deal with support, if you're looking for the cheapest, and if you don't care about cybersecurity, we're not a good fit for you. And that is about as quick as you can throw out most of the objections you're going to get before you even have the depth of the conversation. And it seems to work really, really well.
Yeah. Having that value conversation first tees you up to have the price conversation, right? And if they don't understand the value,
Sure.
they have no basis for understanding the price.
That's correct. It's going to be a 100% objection because they don't connect. If we are, and for some people that don't really care to get into the cybersecurity side of things, or they're not using those types of solutions, they're in a commodity bucket with everyone else, even the geek squads of Best Buy and things of that nature. And, they can just beat you down. And so you've got to do more, you've got to do something different than that. And you've got to stand out and you've got to create value based upon business values, or, automations that you can help them generate, or making their lives easier while they generate more money and more and safer. And so you really have to shift the way you do business. You know, um, you know, and I say this very as positively as I can, but the idea that when you lay with dogs, you get fleas. When you play at the bottom of the barrel, you get what's at the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
And
Right.
so if MSPs find their way to move up into a different type of atmosphere, whatever, yeah, everything looks different and feels different.
Yeah. I think it was Dave Sobel who initially talked about how, at first, on the lowest level, they look at you as a cost. At the middle level, they look at you as an efficiency driver, right? Making their business more
Yeah.
efficient and therefore reducing their expenses, reducing their cost. And then the top tier, where we really want to be as an MSP, is how do we drive revenue in their business? How do we
Mm.
increase their efficiency and give them new technologies and new tools that are actually going to help them generate more revenue? And then we don't look as expensive anymore.
It's stickier too. So
Yes.
when you start to integrate into the organization, when you start to help them, whether it's from accounting perspective or whatever else it is, the relationship evolves, and then it's really not about the next IT person coming by and attempting to steal your business. The next MSP. It's we're such an ingrained part of their environment. We're part of the culture, and that relationship becomes so strong that they couldn't imagine wanting to go with anyone else who probably couldn't do a third of the things that they never thought they could ever do in the first place.
Right. And I'm very
Yeah.
thankful for all the comments tonight. They have been going super fast through here. Um, Thanks to Eric Elder for answering a lot of the questions. I appreciate that. Which,
Oh
to
yeah,
answer your
he's
question, he
got
is
it.
here.
No.
Um,
Yeah,
but
good.
Keith Nelson put up the last comment, and it says, when we discussed Boeing getting their C-17 checks 90 days sooner because our records collecting and delivery, price became a non-issue.
Mm,
Like, if you can get
that's a
Boeing
very powerful thing.
$1 million checks 90 days faster, yeah, your price becomes a non-issue. And that's a great example of how driving business solutions for your clients actually drives up that value and justifies that price. Because that's, I mean, the age old thing. I think if you ask almost any MSP out there, they'll, one of the hardest things they'll say to do is to justify, their monthly
Sure.
invoice. And if you're delivering a commodity type service, yeah, that's kind of a legit
That's right.
question. But if you're actually putting efficiencies and driving revenue, then it's pretty easy to justify, you know, that value.
Yeah, we, uh, you know, especially Eric being in the group, we've went back and forth, especially when we talk about rates and things of that nature, which, when we continue to push that up further and further, uh, because the value is there, it's a little scary that you think you can't get those types of numbers. But when you look at what Keith was talking about or anything else, value matters. And if you can show that you're providing more value than the dollars that are generated, it does not matter. And they won't look at the price. And we've been able to experience that over and over and over again.
Yep. And I
Right.
know that, that's the way
Yeah.
Keith runs his business as well. Keith and I have had lots of conversations about how he does things a little bit differently. And, it works. It really, really does work
Yeah.
when you can drive those business solutions rather than just delivering help desk and some basic cybersecurity.
Well, that's the low hanging fruit is the basic services. What Keith's talking about is, that's a mature that's a mature system that he's working at. That his business is mature, and so he's able to see things at such a higher level than most MSPs or even a break fix environment would ever experience. That's even a higher level of opportunity that he has, even compared to those who are really good in the MSP space, just because he has vision to see those things.
Yeah. Like the example that he just quoted, the highest maturity level is not just talking about value, but being able to actually assign measurable numbers to that value. Like in his case, if he can
Yeah.
make sure that 10,000 longshoremen are on time every single day and on schedule for the entire day, that makes a huge difference to the operation of that port.
Yeah, yeah. Not only from a I mean, just solely on if we're inefficient with our effort, the cost of manpower is tremendous, period, just by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and Keith says that
But
mature
that's
is
what
a
we've
polite way of
experienced
saying Keith
anyway
is
is,
old.
oh. No, I'm not saying Keith is old. I'm saying Keith is wise.
Yes, exactly.
Uh, yeah. Um,
So,
but we really didn't go ahead.
no, go ahead. You're
No,
the
I was gonna
guest.
say we really did realize that when we and I don't know that we did it intentionally, it just kind of evolved what we felt like we originally did and how we had conversations. Um, we just don't have, and I don't call it a kill rate as in that term sometimes seems a little weird, but our kill rate, once they have a conversation with Eric or I about the close of that, they're, the, it is insanely high. We don't lose very many, but we do that extra work up front to make sure that we're looking at the right person. They're interested in what we do and we're interested in what they do. And that's a big difference. It's not just that you're hoping they interview you and see you as being a fit. You better be interviewing them and seeing them as a fit, because if they're tight on the front end, they're going to be tight on the back end, and they're going to nickel and dime everything that you do from their point forward. They just don't get it, and that's okay. There are people that will support them every day. It just won't be us.
Right. I mean, at the same time that they're giving you objections, you should be looking for objections and reasons to decline
Yeah.
them as a client. Now, I will put the
Yeah.
caveat in here, right? Not everybody is at a place where they can do that because they're just starting out or whatever. So that is something you have to grow into. But it should absolutely, from the beginning,
Yeah.
be a goal that you're moving towards, even if you can't do it today.
Yes. And you can do that. I would say that, and I know that Keith preaches this heavily in on all the groups is, it's value generated. It is. But, if you are starting with that 1 and 2 man shop and let's just be really open and honest and say they're not as mature as some of the other SPs. Um, as you said, working towards that effort is an idea of making sure that you're building services that are necessary and you know how to communicate those services without being techie, and then you charge appropriately, because you can never grow if you don't charge appropriately.
Well, and that's another thing that's probably relevant to the whole value thing, right? If you don't price yourself properly, you're not going to be putting yourself in a position where you can actually deliver the value that they need. So you need to
That's a
make
fact. Yeah.
sure that your pricing is correct in order
Yeah.
to drive.
Yes, and what I notice the most in the groups is the lack of strategy, and I don't want to get into this because I say it moves us off topic, but it's the lack of strategy for how people price stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you become one dimensional by not knowing, if somebody says I'm charging X amount of dollars for whatever widget they're doing, whether it's per user, per workstation, a mixture, whatever, and I say, well, why do you choose that? And they say, uh, because somebody bought it. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot. It is validating, but it doesn't validate whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And so having that strategy with that helps you create the or generate the revenue to at least be somewhat financially successful. And then from that point, that's why people like, and I keep hitting on Keith because he's probably the most vocal about value, besides people like Eric or I. Be super vocal about it, but that takes a different level of mindset. It takes a different vision to be able to pull those workflows in and understand it. I think of it a lot like application programmers who want, the user stories. They talk about, if I'm going to build an application, I want a user story. I want to understand how they do their business, and I want to understand the depths of their pain and the highs of their highs, so that I can incorporate all of that into that system that we're building and make sure it kills it from the beginning. But you've got to have that user experience and to be able to know that it's there and to look for it.
Right. And Keith kind of pointed this out in one of his comments. He says that you need to know their workflows, their business objectives, and their lingo. Learning their lingo is
Yeah.
huge because you have to be able to communicate with them. For Boeing, he learned lean manufacturing since that, was the major way that they operated. It's the same thing if you're doing work for dentists, which I know that's a sore subject as well, to most of the
Yeah.
MSP crowd. Because
Yeah.
of traditionally how they use cost as an objection. But, knowing who you're going after and knowing what they're doing is the only way you're going to know truly how to add that value.
Yeah, that's correct. If I were, if I were to have to back up and, maybe it was Eric and I, and we were just starting, we would have to say, look, I don't care how I've been doing it. I've got to do it different. And I've got to figure out, who do I want to market to? Who do I want my clients to be? And it can be as basic as, I want people that pay. I want to be out.
Yeah.
I want people that can responsibly pay their bill. I
Yep.
want, I don't want anyone over 10 people. And I don't want anyone in compliance right now, because, or in, whether it's in healthcare or something else, because I want to limit the amount of additional effort that I may not be able to apply because there are just two of us. And so even honing it in from that perspective, and then going out and having those conversations, and then honing it in further, and then listening, as we've talked about, and fill your backpack full of those objections that you'll never hear again. Because now, instead of someone saying you're too expensive, and I say, hey, we're Simplify IT, and if you're looking for the cheapest people on the planet, we're not it. We're not your
Yep.
guy. And if you're out here looking for someone that can just do help desk support every so often, or you don't care about cyber,
Yeah.
we
There's
probably aren't
somebody
going to
down
be a
the
good fit.
street.
And you're not. Yeah, there's plenty of people, and I can, and we'll refer you to someone, but you're not going to like our invoice when you look at it, because
Right.
it's just not going to make sense to you.
Yep.
And it is just amazing the amount of adjustments that makes in their, in that openness and that honesty and that transparency, that might even bring in a new client that you thought that, or that may not have ever done that from the beginning, because you're just open and honest from the beginning.
Yeah. And that brings up some other types of objections, right? Because by the very nature of what we deal with, we are in a position where we have to be trusted. So um, there's a trust issue, there's a data security and privacy issue, there's a fear of losing control. How do you guys, talk about those objectives or objections and kind of get over those?
We really haven't had as many of those since we transitioned more to this format of being open and honest up front, making sure we're looking at the right person, making sure that we have the decision maker in front of us. Now, where the weird part goes is where we take over a company that may or may not have had an MSP or some sort of IT outsourcing opportunity for that they were currently in, where they had full access to, let's say, Microsoft 365, and they had the admin access. And so that's a different conversation because when we come in and we say, well, we really need to pull that because we then can't figure out who's doing what.
Right.
And so some people don't like that. And they're the business owner and they get to make those decisions to some degree. And we just say, okay, so can we meet in the middle? Can we pull admin accounts from your user, give you a separate one so that it's individually just for administrative purposes? You own that, but we at least know then that if something happens, we can identify who it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that if you were ever compromised as an individual, that they won't get that level of access.
Right. And that's
And so
important.
we find, yes, yeah. But they're a business owner and they want access. And what do you do? Well, the right thing to do is to pull all the secure thing to do is to say no. But that's not the reality we live in. And so we find that middle ground to where we can
Yeah.
say this, or we say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to allow anyone to have it. We don't by default allow people to have administrative privileges. I know that you're accustomed to that. So what we do is we put solutions in that will allow you to elevate those applications to allow those to run as administrator. So there really is no longer a need for that. And then what happens is we start reducing the risk associated with your organization and the likelihood that something bad could happen and compromise the whole organization. Then they start to go, okay, well, why is that important? Well, and then you can go into those compromise situations and
Yeah.
scenarios and things of that nature. And people go, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Honestly, at the end of the day, people want to know why, when they're being told through the process that maybe they wouldn't have the access if they asked. And they say, no, the access would be different. Well, why would that be different? Well, here's why.
Yeah.
Too many hands in the cookie jar. We don't really know. And then they go, oh, well, that makes sense. If they're irrational and they just want control, well, guess what? Your ICP's wrong.
Right.
That didn't fit. That wasn't the right
Yep.
person.
Exactly.
So,
I mean,
so that's kind
even
of how we
back in the
see it.
day, I would have in case of fire, break glass envelope
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
had their admin passwords. And this was back before security and breaches were really a thing. We're talking about, the early 2000s, right? And
Yeah.
just, but I wanted to control. Back then it was more about change management than it was about security. I wanted to know if they
Yeah.
changed something that I could hold them accountable for it.
Hmm. Yeah. That's a big part of it. And these, especially when you have an admin account that's shared amongst people in an organization, things get just really dangerous and whatnot. But like I said, we have really, and I don't say this, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but the process that we've pretty much outlined has been very, very functional and it's been very helpful. Eric, it's been very functional in the pursuit of objection removal. And I mean that wholeheartedly. If people would do things, it's kind of like the whole cause and effect thing. People deal more with effects. When I have a headache, I take aspirin because it gets rid of the headache, but it really doesn't get rid of the headache. It just hides it from me feeling it. But the reality of it is it's really probably a nerve issue, or maybe I have a pinched nerve in my spine that's causing these headaches. If we deal more with the causes of the problem and not try to mask the effects by, the objection is the effect, right? It's not the cause. The
Right.
cause was before that. And if we can shift the direction away, and I know this is kind of is different, a different perspective for people. But when they shift the direction back to what really causes objections, why did why did they have so many objections? Well, they're probably not a good client, but I probably didn't know that in advance because I don't have it defined. And if I can't have a target to aim at, I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a very good point earlier, right before we started about talking about trust, right? The trust objections.
Yeah,
And you said you don't get
yeah,
very many of those. And I think it is specifically because you have the transparency ahead of time. So you actually covered that problem. You build the
yeah.
trust before they actually have a chance to object.
I think that does have I think that has something to do with it. Part of the things that Eric and I do both, because we both do those kind of those closing in related call or conversations, is that we also go above and beyond to help them before they're even a client. So, we're on a call and we're talking about cyber liability insurance policy. Pull it up on this on the Teams chat. We'll look at it and give you some some tips.
Mm-hmm.
We had one company that was they were looking, they weren't sold to move away from their current provider, but they were looking. And so they called us because we continue to talk about cyber liability insurance and making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So they reached out. We had a Teams chat. I'm looking at their cyber liability insurance and I'm kind of skimming through it. And I say, okay, do you have the simple stuff? Do you have MFA on Microsoft 365? And he just kind of, I don't know. And I said, all right, open up an incognito window and let's go find out. And he found out that he didn't, but he thought he did. That right there, that one
Yep.
point, come to find out later on, was the reason that he ended up moving away from who he thought was in his corner to someone who literally is in their corner. So,
Right.
and Eric, we were talking about it earlier. Eric has spent gobs of hours with prospects helping to do those types of things. They may not have turned into a client for us, but we do put that extra effort into those individuals, those prospects, because we want them to understand what value we present. Again, it may not close, but it wasn't about trust. Sure.
Right. And you're doing a bunch of different things there. You're delivering value up front, you're building the trust. But in addition to that, I think for you and talking about ICP, you're actually doing a deeper discovery than most people would do to find out if that client's actually right for you.
Yes. So our partner, our third partner in that, he is really good about that. And so he will ask kind of it's a three-pointed question to me. It's about security, support, and cost, because those are the big identifiers to whether someone's a good fit for us. Because we definitely aren't cheap and we're very focused on cybersecurity. And while we talk about support, we don't have a conversation. We do not talk much about IT support to prospects. When you do those types of things, and I can't vouch for him because I don't listen to those conversations, but that's the cool thing, because it's when he does that, when he ensures that this person is the ICP, our jobs, Eric and I, become super, super easy. Like, it's
Right.
super easy. And we win them. We don't have these losses and we go, man, we really lost one on that one. We and it's not to toot the horn. It's just to say we just happen to find a way that worked. And
Yeah.
that's why we're sharing it, because it does work.
Well, and you probably find yourselves more often going, "Phew, we dodged that bullet," when you lose a
Oh,
client
Eric is
like that.
laughing right now. Yeah. Yes, we have dodged a lot of bullets. And we've probably dodged a lot more than we know, because our partner that does that conversation, that very, very front conversation, he won't tell us about those. He just moves on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no telling how many bullets we've dodged. But yes, that's, to me, is the key. It's if you can mature that process, and it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be super, in depth, but you've got to make sure you're looking and talking to someone that you want to be looking and talking to forever,
Yep.
because that's the idea. Yeah. And if they
Exactly.
give you any heebie jeebies in the belly, they give you any funny feel, that this is an odd fit, then it's probably that's your turn to go, okay, this is not going to work out for us. And we'll just shake hands and go in different directions.
Yep. Like
All
Eric
dollars
says,
aren't good dollars.
all
Yeah.
dollars aren't good dollars. Yep, for sure. So there's another one that frequently comes up, and that has to do
Sure.
with terms and agreements,
Yeah.
length of specifically. And
Yes.
I don't know what you guys
Yes.
do, and I know there's a bunch of different ways, and I don't think there is a
Yeah.
100% right way to do it for everybody.
Yeah.
What do you guys do in terms of length of term of your agreements?
We have been all over the place. So we originally had a yearly term, and we didn't have any. It never caused us any issues. Um, but Eric and I both, when we talked about this originally, we don't like when we get put in contracts. In
Right.
fact, we're more loyal to people that don't put us in a contract. So we pulled it. And so what we have is a 90-day. If you don't like it for whatever reason, give us 3 months and we'll help you. We'll move you to anyone that you want to move to. Now, I want a caveat because I know there's a subset of people out there that say, well, you can't do that because your company has value. And that's true. There are people that look to buy MSPs and they want to buy them based on the contracts, but there's not a contract I've not seen that I can't break. And
Right.
so contracts are not contracts. And they're easily broken because most MSPs don't do what they say they do. So, do you really have a 3-year contract? And do you have a 3-year contract with a 90-day buy, a 90-day cancellation? Then you have a 90-day cancellation contract. You don't have a 3-year contract.
Yeah.
So we have also noticed, and I've looked at this in depth, especially like Evergreen. There's a couple others that purchase MSPs. They don't even look at contract length. They look at tenure. They look at history. So they want to see that you've had, they don't want to see that you've had any particular company, in any particular industry to be a majority of your business, like COVID and restaurant business, right? That's destructive. So all of that stuff in play, we decided that we were going to do a month to month with a 90-day buyout, and we've not had a single debate, and we actually we've had no attrition. So we've not lost anyone in 6 years, other than people that we lost one because they about closed their doors over COVID, and then we had 2 people that really weren't into cybersecurity, but we just took them and then later moved them to a position where they didn't have a choice, and they could either move up or they were out. And so we
Right.
moved them off. Otherwise, we've had no attrition over it. And I think there's also a belief that if I don't get them locked in, they'll leave me. It's quite the opposite psychologically. It's completely the opposite. Because if anyone talks about, and I won't say the company's name, but they want these 3-year contracts, you don't even want to get in bed with them because you're going to be committed for a long time. But the company down the street that'll give it to me on a month-to-month basis, I'll take you every day, even if you're not as good.
Yeah, but you know, I lean, by the way, I lean towards exactly what you guys do. I always had month to month contracts. That's what I believe in.
Yeah.
Um, there are certain things, like for the sponsorships for this show, obviously I will only do a quarter at a time, but that's more or less the 90 day
Sure.
that you're doing. But I
Yeah.
also believe that
Yeah.
when you're talking about a marketing function, which is basically what the sponsorships for this show are, you're not going to get anything out of it for 90 days. And so you have to do it for at least 90 days. But my
Yeah.
other thing is, and
For
this
sure.
is where we're different from the vendors that we buy from, right? Is
Yeah.
because they do have that Wall Street private equity expectation of
Yeah.
contract value. And it's a real thing for them that they have to worry about because that's where their funding comes from. But my
Yeah.
personal bend on this is that if you're doing a good enough job, you don't have to hold them to a contract. And if you have them in a contract and you're not doing a good enough job, they have grounds for breaking the contract anyway. So
Correct.
it I 100% agree with your guys' mindset when it comes to that.
I think that if you want to do a year, 2-year, or 3-year contract, that's your decision as an MSP,
Mhm.
and I'm not here to bash that. I do ask that you don't just work so hard to get them signed and then back off and just do the bare minimum. If you're loyal to that, then it really shouldn't matter per se. And I guess the other kind of caveat to that would be, Microsoft's introduced NCE work to us over the last couple years, where you can do this annual thing and you're committed to it, and the MSP is committed to it. And so I can understand where some people are saying, "Well, I'm doing the annual contract to ensure that they pay me for all." Well, if the business goes under, you're not getting anything from them anyway. And if you don't do everything you say on your contract, they're going to break it anyway. There literally, I haven't seen a contract yet that can't be broken. So, um, that's it's somewhat of, to me, is can be a fallacy, especially if you're not doing really what you should be for your client.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Contracts, especially when you're a small business, are hard because
Yeah.
are you really going to spend the money to litigate? Probably not.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, you can't afford it. They can't afford it. You're going to have to come to some
Yeah.
agreement anyway. Somebody's going to have to give. Um, and most
Yeah.
likely it's going to be you. I just, in my experience, saving yourself the agony and the community reputation and all of those different
Yeah.
things, it just doesn't make sense to litigate.
By the time it's all said and done, you'll end up burning more money unless you're an attorney that owns an MSP and you have the capacity to do that for nothing. Then that's more of a conversation. But you're going to burn a lot of time. What are
Yeah.
you going to get out of it? At the end of the day, it's probably not worth it. So I understand both directions, but we have been able to eliminate that objection. Although we will both say that even when we were a year, we didn't really get objections. That wasn't a real thing. Um, it just wasn't. And we even put in there that they most people don't even read them, period. Because we even have a clause in there, and no one said anything that says every year you will ensure that you'll move to our next whatever package we have for that year. And no one even says, "Well, what if I don't want it?" So most people don't even read them anyway. But we never got objections from it. There are people that are, but really, I'm still teetering on if it was truly not the right prospect, more so than, if they're looking for something, that's something they can hit on.
Yeah.
If they're not looking for some reason to say no, they're not going to say no to it, period. They're going to say, I understand. It's fine.
Yep. No, I completely agree. So we only have about 10 minutes left because I really, I like to be done by 8 o'clock to give Marvin B, you know, let the
Yeah.
audience move over to Marvin's show. Um, so I want to switch this up a little bit to cybersecurity because these days that's a lot of the objection that we're getting
Yeah.
because you're trying to get them into these security plans that are definitely to their benefit, right? And, the first one that comes to mind for me is the underestimation of risk, where they go, well, it's just not going to happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not uncommon. And we do find that we have had an increase, definitely an increase in clients that come from someone close to them having a breach, or they had an incident they're still worried about, they still think about. When it comes to those, um, you're going to hear me go back, and I don't mean to be the broken record. When we first talk to them and we say cybersecurity is our core focus, it is above and beyond everything else we do. That kind of sets the stage for having no objection for cybersecurity because they continue to talk to Nick or Eric or I. So that limits that likelihood. Now, I will tell you some of the systems that even other MSPs and we put in can be a bit abrasive. That's how I term it anyway. It's there's some solutions out there that are very interactive with the end user, and they have to request permission for certain applications to run and things of that nature. So it does feel different, but there's a sense. I think that that leads to some frustrations, but there's a sense of gratitude as well, knowing that they can't just run anything, and they can be human, and they can error, and they can download that file they didn't mean to download, and they know they're still relatively safe. Not, there's still risk, but uh, that I mean this, like that first conversation you have with them, and you level set and you set the stage for what they're about to hear and what they are about to experience, that shifts even that cybersecurity concern. Because then I go back and say, well, if they're worried about, if they don't think cybersecurity is a big deal, well, they're certainly not going to pay for it. And we're over here, we only give one solution set. That's it. You only have one option with us. You're either all in or you're all out. And so for us, we can't say, well, we'll upsell cyber. I think that's crazy. There's too much risk associated with doing that. And here's the last thing I'll say about that. You might think you're okay with just selling IT support, but when they get breached and somebody says, well, who does your IT? And they go Simplify IT, they don't, and Eric mentioned this earlier, we were talking to conversation. They don't say, but we didn't take their most advanced solution. We took their
Right.
low level. They just say, we go through, and guess what? That company's never going to come to Simplify IT.
Yep.
So like there's a much bigger issue associated with not getting involved with that than getting involved with that. And you allow the attorneys to write the legalese and to do the attorney stuff on an agreement to make sure that you're not guaranteeing complete risk reduction, and that there's always a risk. So somebody clicks on something, and we're going to do everything we can to protect you, but we can't guarantee everything. So there's ways to mitigate the legal concerns that people have, but you've got to do it. You have to. Otherwise, it's almost negligence.
Yeah. And as Eric says, skimping on security is a bigger risk to the MSP than the client. And in a lot of cases, that's true because one bad experience, you know, can, through reputation, through
Yeah.
litigation, through a lot of different ways, can ruin your MSP.
Yeah. So in fact, I was digging around about a year and a half ago, and I found a particular MSP lawsuit that was it was up in New York. And I went and asked my attorney. We have a client that's an attorney, and I said, can you pull this? I want to see this case. And we had conversations about that and how we can make sure that doesn't happen for us. But that people can be sued, and if you miscommunicate what you do or how you do it, or your agreement doesn't match, if and if you say, and it's true, if you say I'm the end all be all for all your technology needs, well, guess what? You just opened up a massive risk that they're going to think you're doing it either way.
Yeah. Are you referring to the case where they talked about what they did on their website, but then the agreement didn't match and what they delivered didn't match? Or was that a different one?
That is one of them. So that's a different case, but yes, that is one of them. Yeah. So that's a big deal. In fact, we have a particular um, MSP based attorney that helped us make sure that that wasn't going to be a problem. Like they should look at everything. What do you say in your proposal? What are you saying in your agreement? What are you saying when you have a conversation? And you better not be saying these things that don't match, because you're going to get called out for that. The other thing was it was against an MSP who had a compromised and somebody from New York. It was actually it was an airport that got breached, and the MSP said they were doing certain things that they weren't, and so they were held accountable for it. And they were,
Yeah.
and so that's that goes back to that type of stuff. But you've just got to make sure that you've got the agreement in place. It's worth spending the money to do that stuff. It's worth, um, of course, to be very central to what we're talking about here. When you deal with those types of objections, when it comes to security and stuff, it's just you really need to backtrack a bit and make sure you're talking to the right people. And what I mean by right people is someone that's fit for what you do and what you serve.
Yep. So it's that preparation, it's the setting expectations, it's a lot of different things that you do before you ever get the objection. I think is probably the point to this show tonight. It's all about preparation. All right. So
Yes, 100%. I probably couldn't have summed it up so shortly.
so Craig, thank you very much for, especially the late notice coming in tonight. For those of you who are looking to see more of Craig, he has his own podcast that you should go watch. Justin has actually been on his podcast, and as soon as I
Yeah.
actually get my act together, we'll be scheduling some time for me to be on his as well.
Yes, I'd love to have them come over and take a look.
Looking forward to it. Well, Craig, thanks again. I'm going to shuffle you off to the green room for just a second while I close this out.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is one of those things we don't talk about sales a lot. We have this tendency to talk about marketing a lot, maybe because that's just kind of the way I do a lot of marketing stuff. But this is important. And I think, Craig said it best. It's knowing your ICP. It's putting those objections in your backpack so you're prepared for next time. It's all of the stuff you can do in advance to even not get the objection, right? It's building that trust and transparency up front so that they don't even ask that question. It's building out your agreements so that maybe you don't have 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year terms. You figured out how to actually deliver value and have a, consistent service delivery that means they're not going to leave you, which at the end of the day is the point, because you don't want customers that are going to fight you over an agreement anyway. All right. So thank you very much. Thank you to our premier sponsors, MoveBot and SuperOps, for sponsoring the show. And if you have some more free time tonight, please head on over to the IT Business Podcast. Uncle Marv does a great job. I forget what they're covering tonight, but it's always a great episode. You can find him on LinkedIn, YouTube, all the different places. And with that, I will. So Keith is commenting, is the backpack like Dora's? No, it's not like Dora's backpack. But it's that proverbial backpack that you're going to stick those objections in. All right. Have a great evening. We'll see you on the next one.